The wind rolled across the plains like a warning, carrying dust and the scent of dry grass toward the sprawling ranch house that sat alone beneath a bruised evening sky. Everyone in Red Hollow knew that land. It stretched farther than the eye could see, fenced and guarded like a kingdom. And at its center lived the most feared man in 3 counties. He rode back toward the house just before sunset, his broad shoulders stiff, his black hat pulled low over eyes that had forgotten how to soften. His horse moved in steady rhythm beneath him, hooves thudding against the packed earth. Ranch hands cleared out of his path as he passed through the gates. No one spoke unless spoken to. No one lingered near the porch once his shadow fell across it. They said grief had carved him into stone. That was why the sight at his fence made him slow the reins. A girl stood there, small and thin, her dress faded and torn at the hem. Dust clung to her skin like it had become part of her. She couldn't have been more than 18. The wind pushed against her, but she didn't move. One hand gripped the wooden fence post as though it were the only steady thing left in her world. He should have ridden past. He almost did, but something in her stillness stopped him. She wasn't begging, wasn't waving her arms or calling out. She just watched the house with eyes that held exhaustion, and something else. Pride, maybe, or stubborn hope. He guided the horse closer, boots creaking against the stirrups. Up close, he could see how thin she was, the sharpness of her cheekbones, the hollowness beneath her eyes. Hunger had taken its toll, but it hadn't broken her. "This ain't a charity," he said, voice low and rough as gravel. She swallowed but didn't lower her gaze. "I know, sir." "Then why are you here?" "Nowhere else to go." Simple, honest, no tears. The answer stirred something uncomfortable in his chest. The ranch hands watched from a distance, whispering. No one approached. No one dared interfere. The rancher was known for turning drifters away without a second thought. He didn't allow strangers on his land. Not after everything. He studied her longer than he intended. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of amber and crimson. The wind lifted strands of her tangled hair across her face, but she didn't brush them aside. She stood like someone prepared to accept whatever verdict came next. "You got family?" he asked. She shook her head once. The silence stretched between them, thick as rope. He could feel the weight of old memories pressing against him, the empty house, the untouched second chair at his table, the echo of laughter that hadn't existed in years. Letting her in would mean disruption, noise, responsibility, trouble, but sending her away would mean watching her walk back into a world that had already swallowed her whole. He exhaled sharply, jaw tightening as if irritated by his own thoughts. "One meal," he muttered. "Then you're gone." For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not a smile, not relief, just the faintest flicker of gratitude in eyes that had seen too much. He turned his horse toward the house, expecting her to hesitate. She didn't. She followed quietly behind him through the gate, stepping onto land no stranger had been allowed to cross in years. And though he didn't realize it yet, the moment she crossed that threshold, the loneliness inside that vast ranch shifted. Just slightly. The kitchen felt different with someone else in it. For years, it had been a place of necessity, meals cooked quickly, eaten in silence, plates left wherever they landed. Tonight, the lantern light flickered against 2 shadows instead of 1. She sat at the far end of the long wooden table, hands folded neatly in her lap while he set a bowl of stew in front of her. The smell of beef and herbs filled the air. Her eyes lingered on it for half a second too long before she straightened her back, as if reminding herself to behave properly. "Eat," he said gruffly, taking his usual seat. She didn't pounce, didn't grab the spoon like a starving stray. She lifted it slowly, careful not to spill a drop. Each bite was measured, respectful. Hunger was there. He could see it in the way her fingers tightened slightly around the spoon, but so was dignity. He found himself watching her more than his own plate. Most drifters who passed through town wore desperation openly. They lied, exaggerated, begged. This girl did none of that. She ate like someone grateful for kindness, not entitled to it. "You're not afraid of me?" he asked suddenly. The question hung heavy in the air. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Most people couldn't hold that stare for more than a heartbeat. She did. "No, sir," she answered quietly. He frowned. "You should be." She shook her head. "I've seen worse than a man who keeps to himself." The words landed deeper than she could have known. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his broad chest. "You talk bold for someone with no roof." "I'm thankful," she replied gently. "But I'm not afraid." Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't sharp. It wasn't hostile. It was something else, curious. When she finished, she wiped her mouth carefully with the edge of her sleeve and stood without being told. He watched, puzzled, as she gathered both their bowls and carried them to the wash basin. "You don't have to do that," he muttered. "I know," she said. "I want to." The sound of water filled the kitchen, soft and steady. He hadn't heard that sound in the evenings for a long time. The ranch hands ate outside or in their quarters. No one lingered here. She moved through the room quietly, almost respectfully, as if aware she was stepping inside a life that had been closed off. Her eyes paused on a framed photograph resting on the mantel. A woman stood beside him in it, smiling brightly beneath the summer sun. Dust had gathered along the edges of the frame. She was beautiful, the girl said softly. His body stiffened. "That's none of your concern." "I'm sorry," she replied quickly, lowering her gaze. "I didn't mean to pry." He expected awkwardness after that. Instead, she simply finished drying the dishes and placed them neatly on the shelf. At the door, she hesitated. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the shutters. "Thank you," she said, turning toward him. Her voice carried something fragile and sincere. "For treating me like a person." He wasn't prepared for that. He'd been called many things over the years: cold, cruel, dangerous. But never kind. Thunder rolled in the distance. He glanced toward the darkening sky, jaw tightening. "Storm's coming," he said after a long pause. "You can sleep in the barn." Relief flickered across her face, but she masked it quickly with a nod. "That's more than enough." He watched her step into the wind, small against the gathering storm. An hour later, when rain began pouring in sheets across the ranch, he found himself staring at the door. With a curse under his breath, he grabbed a thick blanket from the hallway and stepped outside. He told himself it was just decency. But deep down, something long buried had shifted. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Morning came softer than usual over Red Hollow. The storm had washed the dust from the fences, left the fields gleaming beneath a pale gold sunrise. He stepped onto the porch expecting silence, expecting the same hollow stillness that had greeted him every day for years. Instead, he heard laughter. It drifted from the barn, light, unguarded, startling against the vastness of the ranch. He followed the sound. Inside, he found her standing beside one of the younger horses, murmuring gently while brushing its mane. The animal, usually skittish with strangers, stood calm beneath her touch. "You'll spoil him," he muttered from the doorway. She turned, startled at first, then smiled, a small, genuine thing that caught him off guard. He just needed someone to talk to. "Horses don't care for talk. Everyone cares for kindness," she replied. He didn't argue. Days passed, and she didn't act like a guest. She rose before dawn, helped mend broken fence lines, carried water without complaint. She learned quickly, worked harder than some men twice her size. And she never once asked for more than what was given. The ranch hands noticed. So did he. One afternoon, he found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the wide stretch of land as if trying to memorize it. In her hands was the old photograph from the mantel. His late wife's smile seemed brighter in the sunlight. "She looks like she loved this place," the girl said quietly when she sensed him behind her. He hesitated, then sat down a careful distance away. "She did. Do you?" The question lingered in the open air. "I used to," he answered after a moment. Before it got too quiet. She studied the photograph gently, not intruding, just listening. "It doesn't feel quiet anymore," she said. He realized she was right. There was movement now, the sound of boots in hallways, the clatter of dishes, the faint hum of someone singing off-key while working. Small things, but they filled spaces that grief had left hollow. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, she walked beside him through the fields. The townspeople who once feared him watched from a distance as they passed near the road. He felt their stares, their confusion. The feared rancher no longer rode alone. "Why'd you really let me stay?" she asked softly. He considered lying, saying it was pity, convenience. But the truth rose before he could stop it. "Because you looked at me like I wasn't a monster." She stopped walking. "You're not," she said firmly. "You're just hurting." No one had spoken to him that way in years. He looked at her then, not as a stray he'd fed, not as a responsibility, but as someone who had walked into his life and quietly stitched warmth back into it. The wind moved through the tall grass around them, golden in the fading light. "I ain't good at second chances," he admitted. "Neither am I," she whispered. "But we could try." Something in his chest, something locked tight since the day he buried his wife, shifted open. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't, and under the wide sky of Red Hollow, where fear once ruled his name, he realized that one simple meal hadn't just saved a hungry girl. It had saved him.